Hello and welcome to Setting the Stage, episode 37, Adam and Halfway to Heroes. Before we get into today's episode with Adam, though, I wanted to make an announcement about a previous guest, Nathan from episode 14. He's having a Kickstarter for his book, The Amethyst Dragon's Hoard of Everything, which has a bunch of options and ideas for players and GMs for D&D. So if you're looking for a little bit of extra something, you check out his Kickstarter. It's fully funded as of this episode coming out, but it has a few stretch goals that could still be reached, and you can pick up a copy of his book, which should be coming out sometime next year, either from funding the Kickstarter or it might even be available at your local game store. So check that out. There'll be a link in the description to the Kickstarter. Thanks. Today I'm talking to Adam from the Majestic Goose Podcast Network. Hi, Adam.
Hello. How is it going, Isaac?
I'm doing good. How are you doing? Summer's coming up.
Yeah, it's going fantastic. It's super hot here right now, so pretty much staying in the basement. Whatever I can do to not go outside.
I wish I could do that, but my recording studio, which is just an office, is in the only room in my house that does not have air conditioning.
Oh,
and I have to close the door while I'm recording too, so I don't even get the flow from the rest of the house. So.
Oh no.
Yeah. By the end of this, I will be hopefully not audibly sweating where everyone has to deal with it, but yes, I will be moist.
Isaac, if you're audibly sweating in this podcast, something has gone terribly wrong. Yeah, that's how my old setup was. And any podcast, and that's when we were recording way too much. And any time I had to sit in there for more than an hour at a time, it became just a sweat lodge. It was terrible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I've got a fan going on my feet, and.
Keep the tootsies cold, and you'll be good.
yeah, it's better than nothing. Right. So let's hear about who you are outside of RPGs before we get into Majestic Goose and all the different cool podcasts that you're doing.
Yeah. So my history with tabletop RPGs is a little. It's I guess now. Jeez, it's 2024, isn't it? Oh my God. I guess I can't even use this kind of spiel anymore. I was going to say I got into tabletop RPGs kind of later than at least like the people that, I play TTRPGs with and hang out with later in life than they typically did. It was something that growing up, I was more of just a video games kid and didn't really ever play any board games or tabletops or anything like that. And then it was for Christmas of maybe like 2015. My middle brother Dustin got the D&D Starter Edition, the Lost Mines of Phandelver. Have you seen that one?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and we it was. Just before that, we're talking like 3-4 months before that, we had just gotten into board games. We had played the board game Small World, and we were like, oh, wow, board games are actually fun. It's not all just, Monopoly and Life and Sorry and stuff like that. So we got that. We dove headfirst into the world of board gaming, got super into it. I've always wanted to try Dungeons and Dragons, but I never knew how, and I didn't know any dungeon masters, right? So, like, how do you start D&D if you don't know any dungeon masters and you don't know like what to do, right? So
whoever wants to do it the most has to step up.
Exactly, and that's how, right? And I think that's how most people probably have to get into it, is if they're really interested into it, but no one else is. They have to DM, right? I don't think there's any other option. So what happened for us was Dustin got the Lost Mines starter kit, and we opened it up, super excited. I've always wanted to play D&D. We have just dove headfirst into board games a couple months ago, so like we're ready for it. Open it up, no board game, just papers, like just a book. We're like,
oh right,
we were like,
that doesn't come with tokens.
Yeah, we were like, how do you how do you play this board game? We don't know what to do. We had no idea what Dungeons and Dragons actually was. And it wasn't until, we kind of shelved that for a couple months, and I was watching a couple different TV shows. So obviously Stranger Things, I think that came out around 2016, which is when all of this was. And I watched like the Community episode with Dungeons and Dragons in it, and I was like, man, that looks fun. And just all these other different kind of like started watching Freaks and Geeks and Dungeons and Dragons heavy in that. And finally, I was like, all right, I'm gonna find, because at the same time I also started getting into podcasts, like listening to podcasts. So I was like, you know what? I bet there's a Dungeons and Dragons podcast out there. I'll just find one of those. I'll find one and I'll listen and I'll learn how you play Dungeons and Dragons. So first step was they've changed their name now, and I feel absolutely terrible because for the life of me I can't remember what they changed it to. But it used to be called Drunks and Dragons, and now I think it's just like their like network is called like Geekly Inc., but I can't remember what they changed Drunks and Dragons to. But that was the first show I listened to, and it was D&D 4e, and I didn't realize there was different editions. So I kept having trouble, like they're talking about like spells and actions and stuff that I have no clue. Like I can't find it anywhere in my D&D 5e like documentation I've got. So I kind of kept listening, trying to keep finding stuff, and then eventually the podcast that really got me hooked was the Adventure Zone, where their first arc is the mostly the box set, right? That Lost Mine of Phandelver adventure is kind of how they started. And after I listened to them play through it, and then I kind of learned, I was like, okay, I kind of see what they're doing. I kind of see how Dungeons and Dragons works now. And then that's what I did. I got...
Were you just listening, or were you... Because I know a lot of these also have YouTube channels that go along with them, where they have, like, pictures of whatever they're using for a board.
Was just listening, because at the time, the job that I had, I was pretty much listening to podcasts like 9 hours a day, an hour of hour of commute and 8 hours of in office. So, like, I was listening to an absurd amount of podcasts. So while listening to that, I was like, okay, I got this. And I started preparing, and luckily I had the players. So I started with that my brother I was talking about, and then my cousin Johnny, and then my wife and my brother's wife, and then that was our party. So we had a party of 4, me as a dungeon master, and we said, you know what, this weekend we are going to sit down, we're going to try to figure out how to play Dungeons and Dragons, and we're going to try this starter adventure. And from the first night, we had some of like the best laughs that you can with like a group of people hanging out together. We had some of like the most fun. Everybody was hooked. My wife was hooked. Dustin's wife was hooked. My cousin Dustin, like everybody, we were all in. We used to play D&D like 4 nights a week. It got like, it became an obsession. And then that's when we kind of realized, like, hey, we can, we don't have to just do the starter adventure, right? We can kind of branch out. I can kind of try to make my own stuff. And that's where I kind of found DM's Guild.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
That's all like the sort of quasi-official stuff that people can put on Drive-Thru RPG, kind of.
Yeah, so if anybody doesn't know about the Majestic Goose Network, the first podcast, and way before it was even a network, it was called One Shot Onslaught, and the way that show was born was just from, we were having so much fun. My middle brother Dustin worked with my oldest brother Sean. And while they were working, they would always talk about it. Like mostly, how I'm picturing it is probably mostly Dustin talking at Sean about Dungeons and Dragons, But the only reason Sean didn't play originally is because he hates board games, so we never even invited him. We were like, oh, this isn't his. Like he wouldn't like this. He wouldn't. We don't even want to like offer it to him and then make him have to like be the bad guy and tell us no. So we just he didn't even come. But after a couple sessions, we kept liking it more and more, and he kept talking to him about it. And then Sean got interested in it, and that's when I was like, you know what? I bet I could look up like a standalone one night adventure. That's got to be a thing, right?
Uh-huh.
And yeah, of course it is a thing. They're called one shots, and DM's Guild, if anybody doesn't know, is a website where people can go and you can publish like a standalone adventure, or you can publish like a 300-page campaign if you want, and then sell it. And the split's something like you get 40%, and then Wizards of the Coast gets like 30, and then DM's Guild gets like 30, something like that.
Yeah, it's something like that. But but the DM's Guild is nice because I think the advantage of that is within that system, you're allowed to publish using whatever you want
Exactly.
from Wizards instead of just the SRD basic boilerplate stuff.
Yeah, so there's a sister site called like Drive Through RPG, and in that one, you can get a little bit more of the split, the revenue split, but you can't use like Faerun locations, and you can't use like official
Beholders, mindflayers.
Yeah, stuff like that, yeah. So, and I didn't find out about drive through for a while. Like I didn't even realize like the distinction or anything like that. But what happened was I found a one shot on DM's Guild that I thought, hey, this could be fun. And Sean brought one of his friends over, and my wife and Dustin's wife didn't join us on this session. You know, they were happy to just do the campaign that we were doing. So Sean came and had a friend over, and we did a one shot. And we all had, it was one of those nights where like you end and it feels like you had a workout, like you were laughing so hard, like we had so much fun that I think it was only after like one or two one shots we were like, hey, let's make this like a regular thing, like a monthly we get together and we do a one shot. And then it was after like the second or third one that we realized, hey, we could probably record this and just like throw it on a podcast network somewhere, Someone might listen to it, someone might not, who cares? But like, we're having so much fun, why not put it out there? But that is how, after that, we put it out as One Shot Onslaught. It was the only show. We didn't have a network or anything. And that went for maybe like a year or two, until I kind of like behind the scenes, I was kind of workshopping my own campaign, because obviously One Shot Onslaught was just running published adventures from DM's Guild, so I wasn't doing any of my own world building or campaign structuring. And it really wasn't until about a year to 2 years in that I wanted to take the dive and try some homebrew, a homebrew campaign, and that's how Halfway to Heroes was born. And then after that, we still only had the two shows. And then once we added our third show, which was not Dungeons and Dragons, it was Monster of the Week. That's when we realized, hey, we've got three shows now. We should probably make like a unified platform that we can like put all these. And that's how the Majestic Goose Network was born, which today I think has 13 shows total on it, counting like Twitch streams and podcasts. So it's grown quite a bit from those old days in 2016 when I was just curious about Dungeons and Dragons to now it being a pretty large part of my life.
Yeah, and I think about half of those are like active shows. Is that right?
Yeah, so a couple of them, we kind of I really spread myself thin early on. Like I would have like this slightest idea for a show and be like, yes. So some of those shows, like we've got one called Doom Clock, which it's a pretty small system. I don't know if you've ever heard of Shiver, the tabletop.
No, I don't think so.
It's like a horror based tabletop RPG. It's actually really fun. And we had like one show in that called Doom Clock, and we knew that one was gonna be like a limited run series. Like it was gonna have one story. It was going to have an ending to that story, and then that was going to be it. So that only lasted, I think it's got like 10 episodes to wrap up the whole story. So like that one's not, ongoing. Yeah, we've got a couple that we maybe started and have kind of fizzled out. I haven't done a lore and pour in a while, but like that one's not even a TTRPG necessarily. That one's more of like an interview kind of show. But yeah, so actively, I think we've got like 5 that are still very active right now.
Yeah. And I mean, it sounds like do you still have like your personal group with like your wife and Dustin's wife and that like separate from the podcast network?
So that campaign, we had, so at the time when we started, I had already had one kid, and I guess he would have been about 1 when we started. So it was probably right when like he started actually sleeping through the night is when we started doing the D&D.
Yeah, it's a change when you get that
Yeah.
freedom, yes.
And then what happened was, we had our second kid, and then Dustin and his wife also had a kid, like almost at this exact same time. It was like a month after we had ours. So once we started, and this was before we like had the Roll20 and being able to play digitally as much as you can nowadays, especially at post-pandemic. So we those campaigns kind of like fell by the side once we had our second kid and their first kid, and then like the sleep schedules just didn't really map up or anything. So yeah, we those quit on about halfway through a Curse of Strahd campaign.
Okay, well maybe they can come back once.
Yeah. Actually, I think we went halfway through a Curse of Strahd campaign, and the sleep schedules got like too hard to manage. And then by the time we were ready to regroup, we actually started what's the cold one? Something rhyme. It's the D&D published campaign. Frost Maiden or something like that.
Rime of the Frost Maiden?
Yeah, Rime of the Frost Maiden, something like that. We started that one, got a couple sessions in, and I can't remember. It was something happened. It may have been that we were playing with Johnny and Johnny moved away, I think. So yeah, I actually currently do not have any home games going.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
I'm just getting out of the diaper stage with both of my kids, and it's feeling like I'm
ready.
opening up a world of possibilities.
Yes. It really does open up a lot more once you've got a pretty consistent bedtime for your kids, and you can pretty handily rely on them not coming down every 5 minutes to need something.
Yep. Yeah. I've got that going on, so yeah, I can do stuff like interview you right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's cool having like that connection with your family and friends. Like I feel like that's why it's worked so well for you, where you're playing 4 nights a week, because it's something that's sort of just building on all these already established relationships that you have with these people.
Yeah, exactly. And then even after those, it kind of withered out, just for one reason or another. Then it got to the point where, when we were, and I was actively involved in all like 11 plus shows or whatever at the peak of the amount of shows we had. Luckily my wife was really awesome about it and was like, yeah, it was pretty much like almost 7 nights a week I would have something to record, and it would just be, I would target sometime after 8 o'clock, and then my wife would, take over the kid duties for that time while I was recording. So luckily I was able to have that bandwidth.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah.
Do you have other people helping out with managing the network, or is it kind of a single person show for like the administrative work and the editing that kind of goes with that?
So I do. It is not a single person work. We've got a lot of really good people on the network that help out. Danny from Roll for Weird, that's pretty crafty, and Crits and Knits. She's pretty much like running the Twitch network at the moment. Pretty much all Twitch streams, she either hosts them or hosts and is playing on it. So Danny's been a huge help. We've got Dragonbait does all the editing for Roll for Weird, that Monster of the Week podcast I was talking about. And she's the keeper of it. So I feel like if you're the either the keeper or the dungeon master of a show, I can see that maybe you like doing the editing personally a little bit more, just because it feels a little bit more like your baby, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So she does the editing for that show, which is awesome. And then we've got E does the editing for Crits and Nits, which Danny's the DM of. So Crits and Nits is like the one show on the network that I'm not a player in, I'm not a DM in, and I don't do any editing for. So that's like a show that is completely like on the network and just completely out of my hands. So that was an easy sell for me to add to the network.
That's pretty cool though, having something sort of grow outside of yourself for the production of it.
Yeah, I love it. So yeah, it's not just me. We've got a lot of really cool people on the network, and Eclipse Jeremy, the DM of that one, edits that, and that's like one of our more polished shows on the network. It's a sci-fi D&D campaign. So that one's got like a lot of different sound effects and backing music and stuff that goes into it. So Jeremy does an awesome job of getting that one edited, and I get to play in that one. So like that's a show that all I have to do is show up, hang out, play, have fun, and then like somebody else edits it and posts it. So that's like one of my favorite shows on the network.
Yeah.
The ones that I don't have to edit are obviously my favorites.
Yeah, there's a lot of work that goes into that. Do you feel like your dynamic with the people that you're playing with is different when you're doing a podcast show versus like the sort of home game that you were talking about?
Yeah, I think that, and it's weird because I probably have different answers on that based on the show. So for example, for One Shot Onslaught and for Halfway to Heroes, those are our two shows that were kind of built from the ground up. They were the first two shows on the network, so we had to build them obviously from like my close friends, right? Like we didn't have any clout or anything to like reach out to people and like recruit to be on the show, because at the time no one knew who we were. So
right.
So for those two shows are just family. So they both have both my brothers on them, and then my cousin Johnny is on both. So brothers and cousin. And then my like best friend from elementary school is on them. So those two shows are very kind of easygoing. We've got almost 30 years of camaraderie like built up amongst us. So they're very like loosey goosey, and we schedule them like kind of on the fly. Like we'll be like, hey, you guys want to try to record next weekend? Yeah, sure, whatever. But
yeah, I heard one of your reviews describe Orbit as almost like a comedy show, like with how your dynamic is for that one.
Yeah, that's what especially for like Halfway to Heroes, like 90% of our reviews are just about how the what's the word I'm looking for? The cohesiveness of our group, and like how we kind of like banter back and forth, and how we feel like we've been running the campaign for like years and years together. And it's really just because it's easy when it's your brothers, your cousin, and your best friend for the last 25 years. So
right,
like you've kind of got that built in, right? You feel comfortable. You don't have to like really worry too much. You know the people you're playing with. Our other shows definitely have a little bit different now. We're there to the point where they've been going on so long that I have built that kind of relationship with them. Like if you listen to Roll for Weird, the first couple episodes were literally the first time we ever played all as a group together. And it was actually not even supposed to be like a podcast or anything. It was going to be a one shot. And we had so much fun that afterwards we were like, what if we made this into like a mini arc or like a little mini, like a mini thing? And then that became like one of our longest running podcasts.
Oh, cool.
And it was just because we just had so much fun playing together. Like I don't know what it was. I don't know how we found that group of people. The way it kind of all spawned was from patrons. We started a Patreon for One Shot Onslaught and for Halfway to Heroes, and part of it was early on. I would run a one shot for our patrons. It was like a first come first serve. First 5 people that said they wanted to play, they could come and do a one shot on Twitch with us or with me, and we would do that every month. And one of the episodes or one of those Twitch or Patreon streams, we kind of flipped it where instead of me being the DM, it was going to be Dragonbait, or aka Deebles. She was going to run it, and when she ran it, that's when we all had so much fun that it just spun up, took off into its own show. And from there, like, that's really how that moment that we recorded the Roll for Weird, I say recorded when we streamed it, because we didn't even record the audio for the first episode. We did not know. So if you listen to the podcast, the first like 2 or 3 episodes of really bad audio quality, just because we did not know that it was going to be a podcast, so we were just streaming it. But we ended up having so much fun, and everybody just meshed so well together that was kind of the catalyst for the Majestic Goose Network, because from there, that's when we were like, okay, we've hit 3 shows, we need a network. And also, if you look at every other show on the network, a lot of it comes from Roll for Weird, like Eclipse. Eclipse will have Jeremy as the DM, who was from Roll for Weird, and it will have myself and Danny in it, both from Roll for Weird. And then there will be Crits and Knits. Crits and Knits is DM'd by Danny, who is from Roll for Weird. And then it's also got Deebles in it, and it's got Tiana in it, both from Roll for Weird. So like that Roll for Weird stream really kind of like cracked the nut on the Majestic Goose Network, and that's kind of how like all these shows started spawning out, with like a couple of the same people from Roll for Weird and from Halfway to Heroes or One Shot Onslaught kind of sprinkled in. And then as we grew, we kept kind of growing in people too. Like if we had a show that needed 4 people, but only, 2 from Roll for Weird or Halfway to Heroes were able to fit in, we would have to recruit like 2 more people. And that's kind of how it just kind of spiderwebbed out into what the network is today.
Well, that's really cool. It's wonderful to have that kind of organic growth where you don't have to go around kind of picking people,
recruiting
to
people
play
and stuff like that. Yeah. Well, I really feel like that in my, I not even just Dungeons and Dragons. I don't know what to say it, but however long I played Dungeons and Dragons and tabletop RPGs in general, I've been very, very lucky with not just my immediate family that I even agreed in the first place to play with me and let me DM that Lost Mines of Phandelver adventure. I was lucky there, and then I really feel like I just kind of lucked out every step of the way when when we kept getting inviting more people to come play with us, and everybody kept having a great time playing. And then we expanded it out. We started a Patreon. We got some really cool patrons that found us from one way or another. And then those people were also very talented and funny individuals that were really good at tabletop RPGs. And it was really just kind of a perfect storm where I think I just got lucky at a lot of different spots.
Yeah. I think it's more than luck. I feel like you have your own talent for kind of attracting that kind of person and reinforcing that kind of relationship from what I've listened to and seen in the Discord server.
Be it, and that will make me feel good if that is it. Which hopefully it is. Hopefully, I try to be super welcoming to everybody that joins, and I try to be super present in the Discord, and even more, especially like early on. I mean, it was to the point where my old, not my current job, my old job, was one of those jobs where like you would have maybe like an hour of work a day, and the rest was just kind of sitting there. So I was literally in that Discord like 7 hours a day talking with anybody and everybody that would come in. I've got a little bit more of a demanding job now, so some things have kind of slowed down a little bit. But we're a network that really does appreciate every single listener, every review. Every time we record Halfway to Heroes, before we like when we all hop in the Zoom call and we're getting ready to record, I'll always check the reviews and see if there's any new reviews and read it to the guys, just to get us, pumped up for the episode. Because every like you get a new review and it's like, man, this random person from a different, maybe sometimes even a different country I've never met before, somehow found us and listened enough that like they like us. They are having a good there's 1,000 Dungeons and Dragons podcasts, right? So if somebody listens to your show, if one person listens to your show, I don't know, it gives me a head rush every time I see a review. So that really drives us.
Yeah, it's wonderful to have that kind of positive feedback for your work. Well, yeah. Do you want to get into talking about? I wanted to focus on the Modras campaign setting that Halfway to Heroes takes place in. I don't know if there's any other of the shows that you've done that are set in Modras.
No, yeah, that sounds awesome to me. I will say that we spent so much time in Modras that the second campaign for Halfway to Heroes we have called the World Modras a few times. So I think talking mostly about Modras would probably be the most beneficial one, since I probably spent the most time there.
Okay, sure. Yeah, that's well, let's do like a broad overstroke for the campaign itself first, and then we can talk about the world after that. I think that'll be the more interesting way to do it.
Okay.
So the campaign plot is that there's a academy, Scrimore Academy, where people are trained to fight mindflayers, but all the mindflayers are gone now. The mission successful. So the academy is closing down, and you have the graduating class that's going out into the world, and you follow your team of 4 graduating people that are sent on a mission to recover some weather orbs that got stolen, because the academy also has like a magical artifact vault.
Yes. That was a really good overview. Yes. Yeah, so at the time when we started Halfway to Heroes Campaign 1, I had seen, and there was thousands of different media, from podcasts to movies to TV, that were about, Magic Academy or some kind of training academy thing, and then look at Harry Potter or whatever. And
yeah, I was thinking Harry Potter spawned a whole bunch of stuff that came off of that.
And it's following like people who are in the academy while they're in the academy. And I was thinking, like, well, what happens to all those people after they leave the school? Like, we always get these stories and books and things about what's happening to them while they're at the school. What about after? So that's why for Halfway to Heroes Campaign 1, we skipped the entire time that they're in the school. We have 4 players, and obviously they've got the 4 characters. And those 4 characters are roommates that have never met before joining Scrimore Academy, but they get assigned to share a dormitory together. So for 4 years, these 4 people have known each other, but we don't see any of that. We only see them taking their final exam, which ends up being, which isn't a very big spoiler, because it ends up in like the first 10 minutes of the first episode, is that it's a dungeon for their final exam. And then they find out that whoever collects the most of these tokens in the dungeon becomes what are called Scrimore superiors, which are like kind of like the valedictorians of your class, but it's a group of 4 dorm mates together. And so that's kind of how the idea came to be. And the entire campaign for Halfway to Heroes season 1 came from one run I was doing. So I had this full other idea for the campaign, and then so this would have probably been like this was years ago now, so the details are a little fuzzy, but I went on a run with my dog, and over the like 3-mile run, I had completely reworked, and this was after we had scheduled the session 0 recording and everything. I had completely rethought the entire campaign, like everything about it, other than the only core concept I did have was about the school. Like I knew I wanted to do something about like the school. And but then during that run I kind of flipped everything. That's when I was like, you know what, let's do it them graduating from the school and us not even talk about what happened in their school. And the whole idea behind that was that we can always go back later and like do bonus episodes. And we're still planning on that. Like we still want to do some episodes of like their characters in like year 1 of the academy, year 2 of the academy, maybe doing some other final test and things like that. So we've got a lot to work with for like bonus episodes and things like that. But yeah, that's kind of how the idea of it's gonna follow 4 people who just graduated, and it was mostly just that I couldn't really find any media that talked about that. What happens to these students of these magical academies after they graduate? So that's kind of how the whole idea spawned.
Yeah, the only one that I can think of is Naruto. I think that kind of covers after they graduate from the ninja school. But
see, and I haven't watched Naruto yet, so now I need to see if I would have watched that. Maybe Halfway to Heroes campaign 1 would have been vastly different, because I would have been like, oh, you know what, that has been happening, that has been worked now.
But it feels more like gradual for that, because the characters already are involved in like the more plot relevant stuff that happens outside of school in school. So, and then they transition to like sort of apprentice relationships with other ninja that are outside of the school and more just like learning from one specific person. And then they become their own people like near the end of the show. And we're sort of getting them as adults now in the sequel show, but
yeah, see, that sounds cool.
It's also just sort of redoing it because now Naruto's son is going to school, and we get to do the whole thing again.
Yeah, see, now that sounds cool, and it seems like something that could have helped me if I would have watched it before doing this the campaign. But yeah, that's really the like main driving idea of what spawned the rest of campaign 1.
Mm-hmm. And so for the audience that's listening, the Funky Four is another like thing that you brought in, where that's like each of the characters' rivals from their time in school ends up forming their own adventuring group that kind of shadows them and tries to sort of mess with them and like scoop the quest items that they're looking for. Is that something that came up like on your own for developing, or is that more of like a organic thing that came from working with your players?
That was pretty. So that one is a trope that I borrowed. So like I said, I listen to the Adventure Zone a lot for my season 1 inspiration. I listened to a couple other like D&D podcasts. It was really more of I cannot think of what media uses this trope. Maybe you can think of an example, but right now I'm drawing a blank. But pretty much that there's like a mirror of the main character or characters.
Well, I think it's used a lot in Harry Potter. Like you have Gryffindor where all the good people are, and Slytherin where all the evil people are.
Yeah.
Draco is kind of the evil Harry.
Yeah, and then you got Pokemon. You got the Rocket. What is it? Rocket. What is it?
Gary is more like the rival. Like Team Rocket is the
Team
comedic
Rocket.
relief.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So
But yeah, like a lot of shonen anime, like Pokemon, do have like the rival concept for sure.
Yeah. So I knew I wanted rivals just to also be doing the overarching goal of campaign 1. And then when I realized that, and I don't know if this, I don't think this is, I can't think of anything off the top of my head of what made me want to do a straight up mirror. I don't know if there's other tropes that, or other shows or anything that do this, but I thought it would be funny to have like a 1-to-1 mapping where everybody has a very obvious like mirror of them. So for instance, we've got Merlin, who is a he's actually like a pretty old human barber, and for some one reason or another he gets into the school, and he's a warlock. So obviously the other team had to have an old, but old in the sense of years, but she's an elf, so she doesn't look old like Merlin does.
Okay.
But so they've got a warlock, and then every person has an opposite. So for listeners who don't know about the party of Halfway to Heroes campaign 1, one of the characters is a turtle artificer named Ubo. So his mirror image is a tabaxi that looks like a cheetah artificer. And then we've got Ultrex, who is a paladin. He's a warforged. We've got a white dragonborn paladin as his mirror, and then we have got Clyde, the Goliath barbarian. His mirror is Claire, the dwarf barbarian. So they all have a 1-to-1 class mirror. But then I tried to kind of do like an opposites thing, like so. For instance, the Goliath and the dwarf, the turtle and the cheetah, and then so I have them, and like you said, the Funky Four, that was improv at the time, and that name stuck. I guess it probably did kind of. It probably wasn't the best name, but
I can hear your players agreeing with it.
Yeah, on the fly, it was the best thing I could think of. So they're just, they pop up throughout the campaign. They're mostly meant to be like, they don't look at our main characters like as bad or anything, and they're like not jerks, but
I got the sense that Claire kind of did.
But... Yeah. So there's some back and forth, but the guys always, every time they ran into them, got very upset, and I thought it was very funny every time.
Yeah,
and even though that they generally would try to be, like, oh, hey, what's up, guys? Like, what do you guys do? Like, they would try to be pretty friendly, but my players were always very big jerks to them, which was always a lot of fun.
Yeah. Okay, so that's a broad overview of the campaign without giving any spoilers to the later episodes. You want to talk about the world now of Modras? Yeah.
So for Modras, what I did, I consider myself a very lazy DM, where I try to I know that if I over prepare, that things will get a little bit too what's the word I'm looking for? Like not flexible enough. And so what I found, and luckily I didn't start doing Halfway to Heroes until like a year into running One Shot Onslaught, and that kind of made me realize that like my DMing style, I realized that if I prep too much, it's going to be like too rigid and not very funny, not very fun. So I tried not to go overboard on world building. So if you look at Halfway to Heroes Campaign 1, really it's mostly just set in Faerun, except every town that the party goes to is always it's always a town that I created, like at least name and basic like how it looks and how it functions. And
Mhm.
I'll kind of hand wave a lot of the times, like, yeah, it's up north from the academy or to the east, to the west, whatever. Um, but really, it's all set in Faerun because there's parts in the campaign where I mention other towns that are in Faerun, but then I just kind of added additional towns that could be whatever I wanted them to be.
Uh-huh.
So, for instance, like if I need a little farming village, I could create Flanderdash, one of the first towns I go to.
Yep.
Um, I needed somewhere that like Warforged lived, so we created Glassburn, and got to make it like a cool kind of cyberpunk city with like neon lights and stuff like that. But really, I went lazy with it, where it's just kind of a generic fantasy Faerun style world. Just because I know listeners already generally will just know that world, right? They'll know that landscape,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they don't have to do a lot of homework to memorize all these new like pantheons of gods and these different deities, and which ones are good, which ones are evil. What are the major factions and things like that. It's just I kind of just and we did it a little bit too for campaign 2. I know we're focused on campaign 1, but we kind of did it for campaign 2 too, where it's like that's the vibe we're going for. That's the setting style. It's just
Hmm.
base Faerun. Like that's how we base it. So if you want to come into one of our campaigns, either campaign 1 or campaign 2, and like not need to do a lot of background studying or anything like that to know what's going on, you can really come in and just pretend that we're in Faerun. And really you're not going to lose anything other than us like saying new town names that are not actually in Faerun, and then describing towns that maybe are a little bit different than what you would expect. Like um, campaign 2, they're actually about to get into some suburbs that just look like 1950s suburbs, which obviously aren't in Faerun, but we've got ways of borrowing from the usual Faerun magic and politics and things like that, and just dropping it into our worlds. Because the people at Wizard of the Coast ultimately are way more creative and smarter than I am. They're way better at creating gods and deities and things like that.
Well,
Like,
I've got more people.
yeah, they got way more people than me. So I'm not gonna be sitting over here spending hours coming up with my own religion and stuff like that. I'll let Wizard of the Coast do it. And I'll borrow and then just like make my own town names and stuff like that. So
So does not much exist for Modras outside of what you've covered within the show? Like that's it.
yeah, I'm trying to think. So there's definitely some spots um in my notes that I never got to. There's definitely some additional Modras lore that throughout campaign 1 we just for one reason or another we just never reached.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, for the most part, it's if you're listening to the show and you know about Faerun, um, really, I'm trying to think of a concrete example, because even in the first or second arc of campaign 1, um, we use references to places in Faerun, but then obviously like and this isn't a big spoiler or anything, but the first arc they had to go to the town Flanderdash that I already mentioned, which is like a small farming village. And at the time, we were having people name things in our Discord and our Patreon. So we were like, anytime I needed a town name or or an NPC name or anything, I would
like
post.
The tavern name, I think, was named after one of them.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that I would just post on Patreon, like, hey, if you got a good idea for a town name or an NPC name, drop them here. I got a couple NPCs coming in the next episode. And then, people on Patreon would drop names. So like a lot of the stuff, a lot of the people and a lot of the locations are actually named from Patreon in campaign 1. So that's how we got a lot of it. I think Flanderdash Johnny named because it was his character Clyde's hometown. So I was like, hey, what's your hometown name? And of course he came up with Flanderdash. But so yeah, that's kind of how like the naming and everything went about, which maybe to campaign 2 ended up kind of biting me in the butt a little bit. The guys, I let them name the world for that one, and they named it Bazaz.
Beautiful.
I love it. And then after, so if you don't mind me going off topic just for a hair.
Yeah, we're good.
So for campaign 2 was a lot different in how we set it up. We have you heard of the game system The Quiet Year or A Quiet Year?
It sounds familiar, but yeah, give me a reminder.
So it's I don't know if it's considered a tabletop RPG. I guess kind of, maybe. I guess not an RPG, because what you do in it is you're building a map. So what you do, you get however many people together. So for my case, we had 5 when we were getting ready for campaign 2 of Halfway to Heroes. And I just drew a map outline on Roll20. And then everybody comes in, we all join the Roll20. And what the Quiet Year is, I think you can get it for like $5. It's like one of those like very cheap tabletop RPG lightweight things that you can buy.
Uh-huh. Right.
And then from that, there's like different cards and things that they give you. And you pretty much take turns going around, and everybody will draw a card, and it will give you a prompt. It will maybe say like some event happened that destroyed half the population in this in this area. Like, what happened? And it'll ask you, and you'll have to make it up, and then that's the lore for the map. And in doing so,
that's cool.
Yeah, we actually recorded it for Halfway to Heroes, and I did it for Shitty Cowboys as well, where we recorded it. And if you're ever going to be starting a new campaign and you need a world to play in and you haven't created it yet, I can't suggest enough to go with The Quiet Place, because it gets everybody involved in it.
I think you said Quiet Year.
Quiet Year. Quiet Place is the movie that I'm very excited about. That's coming out in like a week. I'm sorry. The Quiet Year. Yes. So it's called A Quiet Year. And so that's how we built our map for campaign 2. Unfortunately, I did not know about it for campaign 1. Otherwise, I would have loved to have done it for then too. But it makes it, as a DM, it's like one of the best superpowers like that you can pull out, where now I didn't just make this world. We all made it together. So if you guys put in some whack stuff in it, you guys are going to have to deal with that. You're on your own. It's your fault that you put it in there. And that's how we made the world of campaign 2, which the world is called Bazaz because they got to name it. But it really takes place on just a single island on that world called Severed Key. But in that island of Severed Key, we went around, and for like 90 minutes to 2 hours long, we went around playing The Quiet Year, and what that ends up doing is just people populating and drawing on a Roll20 map, like different. You draw towns, you draw like landmarks and things like that, just from drawing these different cards while playing a game the Quiet Year, and then it's got a definitive ending where after 1 year elapses, like you're done drawing the map. And then so we did that. We drew the map together, and we all populated it with a bunch of different towns and things like that. And then episode 1, like I dropped us in, and now we're using this map that we all 5 of us collectively have created together. And now all the players are invested. All the players know like what the background knowledge of like these different towns and things are. Like I think using that system just gets everybody so much more involved in the story.
Yeah. I've used a similar one called Dawn of Worlds, and yes, it's felt like it's so much easier to have people know the lore for these towns. Like there's so much
Yes.
less exposition you have to give about stuff because the players were involved in the creation. They already know.
And what was that one called? Because I kind of want to look into it now.
It's called Dawn of Worlds.
Dawn of Worlds.
It's like a one-page kind of rule
Mhm.
game. And the one you're describing seems like it has more like prompts to get you going, and Dawn of Worlds doesn't have that. Instead,
Okay.
it's kind of more like it's somewhat like a game of Risk where you're like trying to play for control of the world,
Oh, okay.
but that
That
kind of
does sound
sets up
fun
like
though.
conflicts between the different players, right? And that ends up creating, because each player is usually controlling a race, so you end up creating conflicts between those different races that end up being sort of the history for your world.
Okay. Yeah, so for the Quiet Year, I think the difference is that um you're not really I haven't played the Quiet Year in probably at least a year now, so I'm very fuzzy on the details. So sorry, anything I get wrong here, I apologize. But it's something like you draw 2 turns each turn, and you have a turn order, right? But you're working collaboratively to try to build somewhat of a cohesive story for this map that you're building out. And in that some of it does, you have to make hard decisions. Like you might be building up a town or like building up some lore around an area, but then you might draw a card that will have like a catastrophe that strikes. And now the usual, the player who usually doesn't have any hand in world building now is also doing some of the DM's job for them of coming up with like background history and story of these towns. And then like it just makes it so that as a DM, it will lighten your load exponentially. I cannot recommend enough doing either of these systems really, because it sounds like Dawn of Worlds also will get you a lot of this runway as well. But yeah, Quiet Year. If you haven't yet and you're about to start a new campaign, check, or really even if you're going to a new location in an existing campaign, run the Quiet Year. It lasts like 60 to 90 minutes long, and you'll get an amazing map at the end of it. That will be a lot of fun for all of your players.
Yeah, and it's also something that like the adventure world game style like has that written into the base rules where you're all creating the world together.
Mm-hmm.
It says, I think it's like you draw a map that's mostly blank, and then it gets filled in by like as you're playing the game.
Yeah, that I think stuff like that just makes it so that your players are, more invested, more involved. They're paying more attention. Anything you can do to get your players to pay a little bit more attention to the lore of the world, I think is helpful.
Yeah, yeah. So back to Modras. So like physically, you never really had like a broad map for that. It was just kind of Faerun if you needed a map for it. But is that right?
So we have a map. Now that I say it, so we had one listener who, based off of listening to the entire first campaign, drew up a map that was kind of Faerun, but also with the new locations added to it. That we have posted a couple places. I don't know. I think it's like in our Discord and maybe on our Patreon. So we do have that map, and he was actually a really good like map cartographer. But I I did not create
So there
any
is a
map.
unofficial map.
Yeah,
All right.
and there is an unofficial one that is actually very good. And like I said, we had posted it places, but nothing that I have created. Other than that, it was, imagine you're in a Faerun-esque style of magic and lore, but with these new locations that we're going to be going to, so that I can make fun places that pretty much map to like the players' hometowns and things like that, and what I expect based off of the characters and how they behave and how they act. Like, what do I think their town would look like? And I would ask them too. Like, I would tell them when we were going to be going to their hometown, like, hey Johnny, we're going to be going to Flander Clyde's hometown. Like, you got anything like about that? And that one more slight spoiler is that and if you've listened to at least Arc 2 of Campaign 1, there's a giant shoe house in Flander Dash, and that fully just comes from Johnny, aka Clyde, saying, "Yeah, I grew up living in a big shoe." And I was like, "That makes no sense, dude. Why'd you live in a big shoe?" He's like, "I don't know, man. That's where I was born and raised in." So
he was raised by Mother Goose, right?
Yeah. So Campaign 1, Arc 2, they go visit Clyde's house is a big shoe. So that's just a show of like. It wasn't all just me doing the world building. Like, if I was going somewhere where I knew the players, like their characters would have been before, I would just ask them before we recorded, like, hey, is there anything that you think is cool here that like would be worth bringing up or not? And that's why I think we got a lot of like the cool details in all of the different areas we go to in Campaign 1, because they helped me do that. And then obviously in Campaign 2, we shifted that all left, where they built the world from the ground up with me using the Quiet Year.
Okay. So one of the other things I usually get into with like talking about the worlds is like the gods and the races for the world, and it sounds like that's mostly Faerun based, but I guess like Warforged aren't a part of that. So are there any other like small modifications to like gods or the major races that you feel like you brought in?
Yeah, for the religions, I stuck with strictly the Faerun deities. I'm trying to think off the top of my head without like looking back at the notes, which deities actually like popped up in Campaign 1. I know Talos.
I think it's Talos.
Talos,
sure.
Yeah. I know that one pops up. The God of Storms plays a role. And other than that, I know Merlin's, he's a warlock. His patron's kind of a mystery-ish throughout some of the story. But yeah, religion really doesn't play like a huge part in Campaign 1. And like I said, I know that the people at Wizards of the Coast are smarter and more creative than me, so I'm not going to make my own deity, so I just leaned on them for it. So I think a couple of the like towns will pop up with like what is her name? Chandria. How do you say that? It's like the god of farming or whatever. She'll pop up every once in a while, but
I don't know that one.
for the most part, though, really, it's just using the usual Faerun deities for the gods. And then for the races, it was more like you mentioned, Warforged, or obviously one of the characters was a Warforged, right? So I think are Warforged even supposed to be in Faerun, or are they only in that
I think they're only in Eberron. I don't think they
yeah.
officially exist in Faerun.
Yeah. Which is where, we obviously added the city of Glassburn, which is where like Warforged are born, which is kind of like a cyberpunk-esque city. So we had to take some liberties with what races were out. Even Turtles. I don't think Turtles are like super familiar, and they're not. I mean, to be
I don't
fair,
think
there's
they're
only
in any official setting, actually. I think they're sort of an add-on that you can bring in
yeah,
if you
they're like
want.
a Cholt add-on, right? Like if you were playing through Tomb of Annihilation, I think that's when they were like added in to be a kind of a jungly faction or race. But so I obviously plopped in some additional turtles and things like that. But really, it's just other than pulling in like casting a broader net on which races were included than usual just Faerun races. I didn't really like go ham in campaign 1 with creating any like additional races or anything. They were all official, maybe not Faerun official,
Hmm.
but they were all like official races from 5e that I would just kind of rope in and try to make a compelling reason like why they exist there. For instance, like when we see other turtles, it's on an island. So I try to stick kind of similar to the Cholt turtles living only on the island of Cholt. I was like, okay, so they seem more kind of tropical, so let's make it so that the turtles are kind of off on an island, a tropical island-ish.
Right.
Yeah.
Um, and what about like mind flayers? Like I feel like that's another thing that you brought in where like mind flayers do exist in Faerun, but their like domination of Faerun was I'm not even sure if they were dominating Faerun or if it was like a different plane that
Yeah.
they existed on. So that's definitely different.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Like obviously mind flayers have I mean, they were like one of the first like major nemesises, right, in D&D back like in the 70s. So they've got a long and storied history. And yeah, I actually don't know if in official D&D lore if they ever had any kind of control over Faerun specifically or not.
I think
But
the idea is that they ran to Faerun to get away from the Gith when they
Mhm.
revolted.
Yes, and then they like hit underground in the Underdark, and yes,
Right.
you're right. So for me, when I started coming up with this, the academy idea, and I wanted them to be, post academy graduates and things like that. So my thinking was, okay, well, why is there academy? It's got to have a reason. It doesn't make sense to just have an academy, that's training people for nothing. And that's where I kind of started to pull the Illithid. I've always really liked Illithid and mind flayers. I even play one like a home, not my homebrew, but a homebrew on D&D Beyond. I actually play an Illithid on Eclipse because I like them so much. And so
Oh,
like I
cool.
kind of was like, okay, how can I like them. I know that they're like a serious threat, like a global scale threat. So I can use them as the big bads. How can I workshop this? And really, so, and this is stepping back a little bit. So just for listeners who haven't listened to halfway to Heroes Campaign 1, the whole story going in, even in the very first episode, and I think actually in the trailer explains all this, so no
Hmm.
spoilers.
Yep.
But the academy was created to defend against Illithid invaders, and they were training up soldiers and warriors, anybody that could fight against them, and the Illithids kind of quit even coming to Modras about 30 years ago. Like they haven't seen any Illithid in over 30 years. So all of the funding for the school has dried up because, no one's paying taxes for a school to defend against these creatures that we haven't seen for 30 years. In a lot of people's lifetimes, they've never heard or seen of an Illithid. So why are they paying taxes to create the school, right? So like the
Right.
whole idea was that this school shutting down, this is the final class this is the final four group of like the valedictorians from the class. And then let's see where it goes from there. And then obviously, this will be a slight spoiler. Obviously, Illithids are still kind of around doing their own thing, so they end up being part of the story. But
I'm shocked.
yeah, so that's kind of like the background of why did I want Illithids here. Mostly, it boiled down to me thinking that they were very cool. I liked them a lot, and I knew that they were strong and powerful and would be good in-game, like an in-game enemies, on a global scale. So, like, I was like, okay, let's go with that. And I just like the idea that there's not a ton of stories, media, TV shows, movies, D&D podcasts where everything's chill. Everything's cool. Like, the story starts, and we've been at, like, the biggest peace that the world has seen in 30 years, right? Like, everything's awesome. So, like, there's no threats, right? There's nothing that these four kids even need to worry about. We're closing the school because everything is so good. And that's where, like, I kind of wanted to just try something different of what would a D&D campaign look like in a world where everything's going good? Like, everything's fine.
Yeah, and even that theft, like, as you get through the first arc, it ends up feeling almost like a prank.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, this was nothing. Like, this wasn't even like a big deal. And that kind of continues, right? Like, arc to arc to arc, it's kind of like, okay, like, this seems like it's still pretty chill. Like, they're doing fine. They're doing their little.
Yeah, this shouldn't have happened, but it's not like some world-ending threat. It's just like, okay, well, yeah, we got this back. Let's go return it.
Exactly. And so I just thought that mindflayers kind of played a good role for this because they're so flexible too, right? Like, they can use a lot of, like, mind manipulation and things like that. So if you ever need, like, some hand wavy magic or mind control or anything, Illithid are very handy and flexible in all cases, pretty much, to use.
Yeah. No, they are great villains. I had a thought since you said you're playing one. There was actually a 3rd edition class that was just for Illithids that let them learn new skills and proficiencies and abilities through eating brains.
Ooh.
That was pretty cool. It's called Illithid Savant.
That is cool. So for my character, I do need to. It's a sci-fi one, right? So it's kind of futuristic. What I just have to eat these brain tube. It's like paste, like go-gurts of brain mass, like from, like, naturally dead people, right? Like, I'm not murdering people and stealing their brains. I think it's like once a week I have to eat a brain go-gurt, and I'm good to go.
You're like a vegetarian.
Yeah. It's but I do get some cool powers. I can levitate once a day for free, and then, for a spell slot, and I can talk telepathically, like, to my party and stuff. So it's pretty nice. We took out a lot of the OP stuff. Obviously, I can't do a lot of, like, the mind blast stuff.
That even, like, against an appropriate party, that can sometimes be, like, encounter ending if you.
If you stun everybody for 10 rounds, it's like, okay, then now I'm just gonna go around poking everybody to death or whatever.
So for the campaign, I feel like there were some parts that you guys were talking about, like griffins or something, like the Minotaur, like, clerk that gives them magic items. You were pulling those from One Shot Onslaughts.
Yes.
How much influence do you think you had from the previous games that you'd had for what Halfway Heroes ended up being?
So and I don't know what made me pull Daryl back in. I usually didn't, because, like I said, usually our patrons were naming NPCs and locations. So, like, really, campaign 1, I really tried to not name anybody. I would either name people after a patron or let patrons name them. So like there's a character named Jeremy, and that's because Jeremy was one of our patrons, and Jeremy was then in Roll for Weird and now is the DM of Eclipse. But that is how the character of Jeremy, the NPC of Jeremy, got his name. So a lot of the characters I would either, depending on how much time I had before we actually clicked record, if I had time to post on Patreon, like asking for names, I would use those. If I didn't, I would kind of scroll through Patreon and like find a patron and like find a name that I would think would fit with a character and name it that. But for Daryl specifically, you asking about how much should we pull from One Shot Onslaught? Just some background, because One Shot Onslaught has like almost 100 episodes. I don't expect anybody to have listened to all of them. But there is a one shot where it was just Dustin and Johnny, and they had to go help some Minotaur. And I can't remember exactly. This was like 7 years ago now. I can't remember exactly why, but for some reason, Johnny hated the Minotaur named Daryl. I wasn't trying to be like, he wasn't a bad guy or anything, but for some reason, like the words I was saying and the voice I was using, Johnny hated this character. So then when I was trying to think of a character that would be a reoccurring character, he's the what's it called, where he like sells all the stuff at the school. Like that's who you go to get equipment for any of the missions you need, but you got to buy it or use tokens.
Yeah, he's like the quartermaster.
The quartermaster, that's the word I was using. Thank you, or looking for. Thank you so much. Yeah, he's the quartermaster. So I was like, I knew it was gonna be a reoccurring character, and I don't know why Minotaur stuck out to me, but as soon as I realized I wanted this character to be a Minotaur, and then I looped back to Daryl, the Minotaur that Johnny hated in the campaign, I knew, I was like, I'm just going to use that same voice, the same mannerisms, the same character name. And that's why if you're listening to that episode, I think it's like episode 4 or 5, it seems so out of left field that Clyde hates this guy. And it's because of that. It's because Johnny, the person playing Clyde in One Shot Onslaught, while he was playing Ted, hated this character. And then I intro him, and he's just immediately a jerk to this character. But so that's why, and that's why that's back. That happens pretty abruptly. But other than that, from One Shot Onslaught, I can't really think of anything else I pulled from One Shot Onslaught other than specifically Daryl.
Well, I guess along that line too, not just for Halfway to Heroes, because I feel like that's a bit different, but do your players reuse some of their characters between the different one-shots and One Shot Onslaught, or whatever else you're doing?
So they would use their characters if we were doing like one-shot Twitch streams or anything like that. So like for instance, we had a Twitch show. We haven't done it in a long time now, just because it was on Mondays at like 5:00, which was like right when I ended work, and it ended up just being too hard to keep the schedule going. But it was called MBA, Modras Bloodsport Association. So the lore behind that show was that it was a Coliseum like broadcast TV show, like WWE or WWF, but it was set in the world of Modras, and in this big Coliseum we would have it was a weekly show for a while on Twitch, where we would have different guests that would come in, like people from our Discord and stuff like that. They would come make whatever character they wanted to, and then they would fight some random encounter that me and I had a co-host, kind of a code dungeon master, and we were dungeon masters, but really we were more commentators. Like if you think of like the UFC, like Joe Rogan and those people that like sit on the side, we would kind of DM in that format. Like oh no, from the top rope, here comes, we would say the character name, and then we'd be like, oh, they're going to need to roll athletics check or whatever. And then they would roll in, and we would narrate it as the commentators. So part of that was, we needed a wide range of different people bringing a lot of different characters into the arena. So like that show, we had a lot of people like Dustin used Merlin in one, and I think he even maybe used his newer character. But other than that, like other than some one-off appearances, really they haven't really reused any of their characters. Even for One Shot Onslaught, eventually the characters hit level 20. So obviously, like that was it for those characters. But One Shot Onslaught's not an ongoing campaign like Halfway to Heroes and Halfway to Heroes Campaign 2 are.
Right.
So for that show, they just all had to make brand new characters level 1. And then we just started back at low level one shots and worked our way back up.
So
But
for
yeah.
One Shot Onslaught, they did kind of use the same characters throughout, just doing a new one shot with them each time.
Yeah, so for One Shot Onslaught, even though it was one shots, so there was a guild called the Adventurers Guild, and that was kind of the narrative ropes that tied everything together.
Uh-huh.
So we could have guests come on. We had a couple all guest episodes where we would have people from a bunch of different D&D podcasts come, and they would be like a different team that was set up in the Adventurers Guild, and I'd run them through a one shot. So,
Cool.
but then when we would circle back to our main cast of characters, they were always the same characters, same level, because we started doing like very low level one shots, and then it was what my level strategy was every 2 one shots they would just gain a level. So pretty much after 40 episodes they were level 20, and then they had to start new characters back at level 1, and we kind of did the same thing again. But yeah, they play the same reoccurring characters, same they stick to a certain level and equipment set and things like that, and then they would just pretty much every episode starts with them going into the lobby of the Adventurers Guild, getting their quest, and then going and doing a one shot for like 2 hours, which would be about 2 to 3 episodes of content.
Mhm. Yeah, it did seem like your recording schedule is you do kind of 2 episodes per night that you're recording, and that ends up being like 2 1-hour episodes.
Yeah, for One Shot Onslaught, we would actually record all in one shot. So we would sit down, we would record. They would typically last like 3 hours, but that was a lot of us like kind of like just hanging out, chatting about whatever. So that would get edited down to about 2 hours long, and then that would just make about 2 1-hour episodes. We did have some. I can think of, we had maybe like in our like 50, 60 episode that we have out, we had maybe like 2 or 3 that went longer than 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they were always the same characters, and that's kind of how we tied it all together. It was really, it's a really fun show because we have that flexibility, right? Like we can bring on guests anytime we want and not have to worry about like the actual lore and the story getting messed up and having to work them in. It was very easy to just be like, hey,
Yeah.
this person doesn't have a team for today and they're looking for a job too. You mind if they get 50 gold of the payout and they join you or whatever, and then now we can have a guest on the episode.
Yeah, it's more about like the social dynamic of the players instead of whatever's going on in the characters' lives.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I think I've actually covered pretty much everything. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about that you feel like I haven't asked you yet?
No, I feel like we had a lot of really good questions about kind of multiple shows on the network now. But yeah, I can't think of anything we missed.
Okay. Well, the usual sign off that I do for people is asking for you to give some like advice for other DMs. So, got anything you want to share for that?
Yes, I do. Don't be like me at first when I was first getting into D&D, where I was. It can be insanely nerve-wracking, right? Like, if you know that you're going to be the DM and you've got, it doesn't really matter how many people you got coming to play, 2 people, 3, 4, 5, 6, like knowing that you're kind of responsible for their entertainment for that 3-hour block or whatever you're going to play, it can get really stressful. Like, you just thinking, man, these 4 people are going to be coming, and they might be close friends, family members, whatever, but they might be, a little bit more distant. It can get really stressful, like putting that on your shoulders, that it's all on you to entertain these people for this block of time. And I think the thing that helped me absolutely the most be a better dungeon master, and it also helped my mental health the most, was just thinking that these people who are coming to play with you, like, they would be, I'm sure, and obviously this isn't going to be a catch-all, and this won't be valid for every single person, but in my experience, all those people are completely content to just come and hang out and just chill with, obviously they're like at least somewhat friends or somewhat know you. Like, they bought in. This is what they want to do. They have committed to it. You can take some of that pressure off your shoulders and just know that no matter what, all of you are going to be hanging out. You're all just going to be having fun, laughing, joking. It's not only on you and your shoulders to make this a fun, 3-hour block, 2-hour block, 4-hour block, 12-hour block, however long you've been playing D&D. It's not all on your shoulders as the DM to make the fun. They're the players. They can also, contribute. They can make it fun themselves. That's just one thing that I used to always really stress about, is I didn't want to get a group of 4 or 5 people together and then, spend 2 hours and then those people not have fun. And it really stressed me out. And it really made me like kind of anxious and like not excited to DM one-shots and adventures and things like that. And once I finally got over that hurdle, that literally we could be sitting there for 2 hours without, like, just hanging out, and everybody's going to have fun. Like, no matter what, just know those people are committed to playing with you and having fun. And this is what their idea of entertainment is. And this is what your idea of entertainment hopefully is if you're DMing. Otherwise,
right,
I shouldn't. Like, don't do it. If you're not having fun, don't do it. But
well, I think that's kind of what you're saying in general. Is
yes,
like,
in general,
you're one of the players. You should be having fun too, right?
Yeah,
and we have like this player DM divide, but it's a game. Like, everyone's supposed to be having fun.
Exactly. Like, it's not just on, and that's how I always had it in my mind when I first started, was like, it's solely the DM's purpose or like responsibility to generate fun for all the other people playing. And that's not the case. It's a collaborative experience. It's for everybody. You don't have to have the highest standards for yourself. Like, you can go in with 5 bullet points of notes for an adventure, and I guarantee you, especially if you're playing with like friends and stuff, I guarantee everyone's gonna have fun. No one's gonna complain about it. And honestly, like, you're gonna be your own worst critic. So just try to relax about it. Is kind of what I'm getting at.
All right, cool. Well, thanks, Adam. That's really good advice.
Yeah, thank you, Isaac. This was a lot of fun. I'm sorry, I literally do not know where these 90 minutes went. like I feel like we sat down, I hit record, and then you said, "What? We're at the 90-minute mark," and I was like, "What?"
Well, you can see how sometimes this goes to 3 hours with people. They just keep talking, and it's like, yeah, sure, go for it.
Yeah, I had zero expectations that I would have stuff to talk about for this long.
No, that's perfect. That's what the show is for, man. Don't worry about it.
But yeah, I enjoyed myself a lot, and I really feel good that I got to like talk out a lot of the stuff that I haven't got to, like, I mean, campaign 1 ended 3 years ago, I think. So like I haven't got to talk about a lot of campaign 1 stuff. And campaign 1 was my baby. Campaign 1 was the first ever homebrew I ever did. I don't know if you know that, Isaac. It was the first homebrew I ever did. And honestly, I'm trying to think now. I've done campaign 1 homebrew, and now campaign 2 is homebrew, but it's not finished yet. I guess Doom Clock was homebrew also, and Shitty Cowboys was also homebrew. So I've got a couple now, but still, Halfway to Heroes 1, campaign 1 is still like my baby. I've got a tattoo from campaign 1, and it's my first ever homebrew, and it's like our biggest project, like in terms of like listenership and reviews and things like that.
Right.
So I really have a fond part of my heart is for campaign 1 of Halfway to Heroes. So I really appreciate this opportunity to come and talk about it for 90 minutes.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it too. So yeah, thanks, Adam.
Thank you.
Quick reminder that I'm looking for people to go on the show, so if you or someone you know would be interested, please direct yourself or them to gocorral.com/STS for instructions on how to become a guest on Setting the Stage. That's GOCORRAL.com/STS. Thank you.